Ladies and gentlemen, come gather round, come gather round, come gather around. Today, we're going to be fixing up some rusty and dented fenders. And while it's a step side fender, you're not supposed to step on this part of the fender. You step on the step of the fender. So we're going to pull all these out, which I did. So this is how we did it.
So what you're watching is me getting into this. The first thing I did was I peeled off a whack of the paint with knotted wire wheel. You want to wear leather gloves. You want to wear eye protection, probably even a face shield. These things whip chunks of metal at you. You'll find them in your skin maybe years later. So I took off all the paint, and then I took off the wheel so I could get inside. This thing was really crushed in on this side. This was probably the worst of the two, and oil can, something nasty. I was trying to figure out like a shrinking disc and how to get rid of oil canning. So this is my first big go at a really dented panel on this truck. The worst dents are in these back fenders, and I did all the cab stuff first. Check out the video above for cab repair, which is just cut and weld in new metal. Not much in the way of rust. Anyways, I'm playing with the shrinking disc. I got better at using the shrinking disc a little bit later on. And we'll talk about that later, but I'm wailing on the fender using a dead blow plastic hammer to try and get some of the dents out. I figured I would just cave the thing all back out the way it's supposed to be and then smooth it off with a shrinking disc. I used a little bit of sanding to find some high spots and a dolly, but not enjoying bodywork. I may have mentioned that on every single video that I've done. However, I got it closer, and then finally decided, you know what, screw this. Let's take the fender off of the truck and mess with it that way. Turned out the flanges on that fender are just nasty with rust. So I cut out metal and made some new flanges so that I could replace them, because I could patch them, but there were so many places that needed patching. Again, I think these things were just assembled and then like bare, and then made, bare, put together, and then painted. So if it wasn't painted in between, it would rust.
These fenders look like they're in really good shape, but interestingly, under the flange over here, it's not that good. Take a look at this. There's quite a bit of rust all in this mounting flange. So to deal with this, there's two layers here. There's, I guess, a reinforcement layer and the edge that used to be the fender itself. So I set the fender on a piece of 18 gauge steel, and I just traced it out, plasma cut it, ground it, cut the holes, and I matched all the holes along here. What I'm going to do is just tack weld this on and then go through and slice. I'm going to slice this off with this kind of tacked in place, and then as I slice it, I'll push the thing down and line it up. It's kind of like weld this over the defect and then cut through both, push it down, weld this into the fender, and then take the defect off the back. Kind of. In theory, this will all be lined up. And then once I have this all together, I'll trace it out again and make a reinforcement for the back. The factory reinforcement starts here and goes all the way along to roughly this point here, and then there's nothing, and then another reinforcement goes here and travels all the way around the same thing to this point there. And instead of trying to save this and make a new flange, and there's still going to be rust and crap in between, I'll just make them all new. So that's the plan. We'll see how that goes. A couple other things I need to do. This thing is sitting so low that I had to take some of these braces off. This brace actually hits the tire when the thing would be aired out, so I have to move that brace. Not a big deal. One of them was already broken off.
So with a new mounting flange cut to fit and clamped all over the place, I just ran tacks all around the outside to stick it all together so it doesn't move, and then I sliced through. Some folks take the cutting disc and go straight down vertically to put it in. Some people go at a slight angle. I think I did a little bit of both. I'm not sure it really matters. If you can get a fit where there's no gap, you're going to have less shrinkage. I ended up with a little bit of shrinkage on this. It was The finished full length of the fender on the mounting surface is 62 inches from front to back. And this shrunk like, I think, an inch and a half or something. So once the whole flange was welded in and the fender was done without the reinforcements, I put it through the stretcher, stretched it back out till it was 62 inches, and then I made the reinforcement fit behind that. And I skipped a bunch here. You didn't see me weld the whole thing. I'm just like skipping ahead because otherwise it's too long a video and you fall asleep. Leave a comment below if you're currently asleep. Subscribe if you're starting to fall asleep. Setting that flange into place, and I think it's more of the same. Oh man, you can see the difference here, the good side and the not so good side. So it's kind of cool that it's all coming together. Lots of vice grips, clean her all up, clamp her all down. I pre-drilled all the holes roughly where they were supposed to be located. I kind of traced through the existing holes in the flange onto the new mounting flange. I'm using a carbide cutter on a die grinder to elongate the holes. Then we're fixing some rust. This is the only spot of rust on both the rear fenders, which surprises me. It might be because this had an open differential and it was doing the one wheel peel in winter, and that has caused it to rust there. I don't really know, but here we are. We're fixing it. Check the video above for seeing different ways of welding patches in when we're repairing the cab on this truck. I do like to choose between MIG or TIG. MIG is pretty forgiving. TIG is not very forgiving. Oxyacetylene takes a fair bit of talent. Every type of welding has its place. For the front of this fender, I welded it all in with TIG because if I'm going to hit it or shape it or shrink it or stretch it, a TIG welded bead is much more malleable and easier to work with. MIG is a lot less forgiving. So I think I used MIG on the ends where it didn't really matter, but on that leading edge it's done TIG, zero filler. I did have a piece of MIG wire in my hand, I think 030 wire, just in case I blew a hole in something I could still fill it back in, or if it's getting a little out of control on me. Yeah, I am using MIG on the edges. I'm not likely going to be shaping the edges. If you're really talented, you could do the whole thing with TIG. I don't. But I definitely have found that the TIG beads are much more malleable to work with. So, working away and straightening the wheel arch or the wheel flange. I just have a piece of metal rod with a slot cut in it, and then I can get that back in the curve it's supposed to be. Now we're working on all the dents, try to get them all out. And I'm trying to use a slapper and a hammer and a dolly, and I spent forever in a day trying to do this. I think I had somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 recorded hours on working on these fenders. And that's not including the stuff that I didn't record. So, man, I'm getting a lot better at it. Got the heat gun trick going on to try and pull up some parts of the fender, yet maintain the crown while I shrink it off. And feeling away, trying to get it all nice. I will soon be blasting all the fenders, spraying it with some epoxy to block it all and find all the high and lows and give it a little bit of tweak here and there to try and get it as perfect as possible. I do find the plastic mallet is a little bit better for me in just gently persuading little bits of metal. It may not work for you. I don't know. It made sense at the time and I was pretty happy with it.
I'd like to say excuse the mess, but you're going to be okay. Let's say you got a dent right there on a panel. So what you can do, whether you use a acetylene torch or a shrinking disc, is add some heat to this. If you apply heat to your high spot right here on your panel, the metal that you heat up, pointing the torch right there, makes this want to expand. But it cannot expand because this cold metal all around it is going to resist it. It's cold. It doesn't want to expand. It's going to kind of lock it in there. So with the outer metal kind of holding it in place, and you're heating this up, it's going to expand upward. When I use an oxyacetylene torch and I've got this nice and hot, I give it a little smack with a hammer once or twice in the hot area, which kind of upsets the metal a little bit, and the tension that's created with the expanding metal and the resisting cold metal, when you smack it, the little impulse thing kind of makes the cold metal push that hot metal back in on itself, and it will actually make it smaller. It's ever so slightly thicker, but it's going to make it a little bit smaller. Then you want to cool it off. When you cool it off, it contracts a bit more as well. The shrinking disc is a little like voodoo in the way. You don't seem to smack it with a hammer, but you heat it up, and maybe it's just a little bit of vibration of this. I don't really know. I'm new at this. You'd rub that on the surface, it's going to heat up, it's going to change a bit of color, and then quickly you put a wet rag over top of it. I think the vibration of this thing and the movement of it spinning makes this thing kind of vibrate its way in, and then you cool it off with a wet rag, and that contracts it. It's actually pretty freaking voodoo when you're working with it.
On to the back side. Something I didn't do was scrape all the undercoating off of the back, so let's get on that and scrape it off. Then let's check out the driver's side fender. This is a long step which has a different cutout for the spare tire. I've cut the vehicle down to a short bed. Check the video above to see about cutting a long bed into a short bed. Heat gun does a really good job of getting the old undercoating nice and soft and gooey, and then it dries pretty well and quick and crispy, and you can vacuum it all up. I tried to clean the paint off with sander, but the wire wheel worked a whole lot better. Learning from the change in shape of the other fender, I welded a brace in here just for the corner where I'm putting in the repairs. It seemed to be the worst at the front. Cut out a bunch, a couple braces on the inside, a couple braces on the outside. Same kind of stuff that we did before. Cutting them out, welding them in, trying to make it all nice and pretty like. It's you kind of got to look at all the stuff you got to do and then decide what is the best bang for your buck. On the other fender, redoing the whole thing was the best. On this one, piecemealing it seemed to be the best because it was just damaged in areas but not everywhere. So I did piece by piece. Kind of satisfying to see this thing growing better. When you're doing patches, it's not always good to have a nice 90-degree corner. It's smarter and less stresses on the panel if you can have curved ends. In this case, I didn't worry about it too much. Probably should have, but I didn't, because it's going to be okay. I defy you to look at this when you're done and you're going to go, did you use 90-degree corners on your patches? I don't think you'll notice. If you do notice, leave a comment below. And subscribe and tell me all about how you wish I had cut the corners differently on the edge of my patches. But if you do enough of this, your neighbors are going to call you Patches. But then you got to wear one of them frilly collars on a clown nose and have a horn. At any rate, as usual, I use cardboard or paper to make a template, fine-tune the metal with a little sander on the edge. Some folks cut the fender to fit the patch. I tend to tweak the patch to fit the fender. It depends what works for you. If you're doing this for money, this is probably not the fastest way to do it. But I ain't being paid nothing. Though I am open to sponsorship, subscribe and leave a comment below if you're interested in sponsorship as well. Leave 2 comments if you're interested in sponsoring me. I'm sponsoring me, and that's infinitely more than nobody.
So I've been dealing with some rust in the edges of the driver's side rear fender in the pocket for the spare tire. A couple issues around the edge and trying to get this shape nice and good in the middle again. The edges around here were pretty decent. A couple spots for bubbles here and on the leading edge in this area. And at the very front of the fender up here, there were some bubbles coming through. This beauty attachment on an air hammer works awesome for chiseling out and breaking up any bits of rust, and also putting holes in the sheet metal. So if the metal is at all iffy, this will confirm to you that you should cut it out and weld in new metal. So this from about here to here is new metal on this side. The front part here, this is reasonably solid. I didn't cut it out. I did seal it up nice on the other side. And then up in the front, we cut a section out like this. And I think I MIG welded it. I don't remember. At the back side, there's a bit of etch primer here, but that's that front leading edge there. I think I hammered it a bit to get it shaped better. If I hammered it, I probably TIG welded. I don't really remember. This one is the patch on the inside. I didn't have to deal with the outside. The blue you see here is like phosphoric acid, rust mort kind of thing. And then this is the top edge where I had to do both pieces. Looks like I megged it, but that's all patched in. Not too worried about making the backside. Looks awesome because it's the backside and nobody cares. I did not have to replace the whole flange on this fender. It's actually pretty decent, but the front edge was probably the worst. And I patched a piece here, and I patched a piece here, and I patched a piece top and bottom here. Looks like I did the bottom of this one. And I did a really crappy patch here. I'm gonna have to do a better job of that. However, didn't have to make the whole new flanges on this one at all. It's actually pretty decent. Next, we'll be pounding out all the dents. Try to deal with this walnut bag of disaster.
More hammer and dolly work, always a wonderful challenge. I always find it tricky trying to get the dolly in the right place on one side while I'm smacking it with a hammer on the other. I have a tool for that. That's going to come up in a moment. Fair bit of playing around to try and get this right. As you get closer to the end, it's more a test of your patience. I'm using the slapping file, I've got the shrinking disc, I got the compressed air. I'm trying to refine everything and get it smooth right down to the last bit of perfection. Kind of annoying.
That's an acceptable level if I'm going to put filler on that.
Check out this cool tool which I just made and then had to go back into the fenders. This is a bullseye pick. Check the video above on how to make your own bullseye pick and pick out all them low spots with the accuracy of a bullseye, because it is that awesome. It's actually such a cool tool. I'm really impressed. Put down a little bit of felt pen, hit off the low spots, get this thing pretty decently acceptable. It worked fairly well. Bit more of the shrink, bit more of the hammer. This thing is getting pretty smooth. It ain't mirror perfect, but it's pretty decent. Then we got some brackets that I had to relocate, the reinforcement brackets to hold the fender shape while this thing is aired out, which just meant welding in some patches and moving some brackets. I'll need to lengthen the little rods too. Did a combination of MIG and TIG, kind of just depending on what I was doing to put this all together. Then I have all these brackets. I did change a couple, the back rod brackets on both front and back fenders. I think I left the front ones alone. Off camera, I did blast the back side of the flanges and epoxied the back side as well as the flange itself. Got the thing clamped into the whole whack, pretty much every vice grip. I plug welded to get those things all in. Plug welds are probably my favorite kind of weld because they don't really distort and change and shrink and mess up the whole panel for you. So they're kind of handy. Drilled out all the holes, got it all nice and ready to go, tweaked everything. The next part of this is going to be blasting the whole thing, an epoxy primer all over the whole thing, and then we should be done. And hey, thanks for watching.